Anyone that's telling you that this bull market cycle has just started is full of crap. It is the beginning of the end as Bitcoin enters its last leg of this bull market cycle. This is arguably going to be the most profitable period in the market, and in today's video we'll be covering this, also going over the charts, suggesting that we are a lot closer to the end than most people may think. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe. Without further ado, let's jump right into the video. And let's kick us off with some bullishness here. I mean, the charts paint a very clear picture. Take a look at this Bitcoin chart on the weekly time frame, mind you. You can see that we had a massive weekly candle closed above strong resistance. Bitcoin had several candles around this level, 119.5K to be exact. We wicked above it a lot, and then we ended up coming right back down. You can see here that this was the fuel that we needed to move higher. Finally, a weekly close above this level. Now, in the short term, I still think that a potential pullback is possible, but this paints a very clear picture, and that is that we will likely be going much higher from here after this confirmation. So what's going to happen in the short term here? I am still personally favoring a little bit of a move down before we move up. I'm trying to balance the channel in terms of trading versus spot portfolio. As I said, from a spot portfolio perspective, I just keep holding my Bitcoin because I do think that we will likely go ahead and explode higher. But from a trading perspective, we cannot ignore the fact that we did have an SFP above the previous all-time high. So you can see here that the previous all-time high was actually around 124.4K. We had the wick all the way above, almost to $126,000 yesterday, and then we ended up closing below that previous all-time high. So to me, this means that we can potentially move lower before we have sustained upside. Now, whether or not this will come from a wick to the upside only to move lower, or we end up just losing this current level, which is also one of the previous all-time highs set in July, only time will tell. But I ultimately do think that we will likely go back down to retest lower levels. And at this point, should we get a weekly retest of this level, it would actually be a pretty strong longing opportunity in my opinion. Now, we need to see the reaction at this level, of course, if we are to even get it. If Bitcoin gives us this opportunity, I will personally be looking to go long. Now, if you're in my premium trading group, you do know that I'm actually currently trying to short this top, expecting lower levels, and then I will go ahead and go long. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And if you'd like to see how I am personally operating in this market from a trading perspective, you have that first link in my description down below. You click this, it'll bring you to Telegram, DM me the word premium, and I would be happy to onboard you into my free premium group. The only requirement is that you sign up with one of my affiliate exchange links and you start trading on one of those exchanges. If you're already trading on Bluffin or Weeks, we can easily get you into my free group. Reminder, these are my own personal trade setups and how I'm operating in this market. Now, I also wanted to bring this to your attention because you can see that the dollar is actually bouncing from a pretty important support level, which we held as support many times before. And so I'm actually expecting the dollar to get a little bit of a bounce here. And typically when the dollar gets a bounce, what does this mean for risk on assets? We can get a little bit of a correction. Now, I don't want to tell you that we're 1,000,000% going to get a deep pullback on Bitcoin because the truth is no one really knows. We broke above the all-time high, but typically when we do accept back within the range, it does tell us that Bitcoin can go ahead and move lower before we move higher. That is currently my base case from a trading perspective. But to be perfectly clear once more, this weekly close tells me that we are moving much higher in this cycle. So I hope that makes sense. Now, I also wanted to talk about ETH against Bitcoin because a lot of people have already been talking about altcoin season, and you can see that ETH Bitcoin looks like it wants to potentially start turning around here, but I don't think that this will be the case. My base case here is that we at least tap into this bull market support band for ETH Bitcoin, and this would of course coincide with Bitcoin dominance moving to the upside, which we've been covering on the channel at length. If I go on the weekly time frame, you can see that we closed a very bullish candle for Bitcoin dominance, nice and green, and now we're getting a little bit of a retracement at the beginning of the week. But ultimately, because we tapped into this crucial support level 1, 2, 3 times over the course of many years, and now this year we tapped into it once more on our way down, to me, it seems like Bitcoin dominance will likely continue to increase. And as per my last video, you want to see this happening as Bitcoin leads the way. Hopefully we get some distribution right around these levels when Bitcoin consolidates much higher, and then we get a decent altcoin season. Right now, the highest risk-adjusted returns, in my opinion, in this market are in Bitcoin. And it also looks like the total 2 crypto market cap is about to have a major breakout. Now, we covered this in my previous video, but if the daily candle closes like this, it would appear to be the highest daily candle close in history for total 2, which I'll remind you is the total crypto market cap excluding Bitcoin. This would be absolutely massive if we were to close above this level, because it would tell us that we are likely about to move much, much higher. But in line with what I've been saying about Bitcoin dominance, Bitcoin will be leading the way, dragging the rest of the market with it. So for example, if Bitcoin just continues to explode to the upside here, obviously the rest of the crypto market will be following on their US dollar valuation. However, this is where I still think that Bitcoin will be outperforming, therefore Bitcoin dominance continue to increase, at least for the next few weeks. I also wanted to cover this, and that's the fact that the short-term whale unrealized profit does hit a cycle high at around $10 billion. This tells us that there could be a little bit more selling around these levels before we're ready to really break out to 130 and beyond. And I also wanted to show you this chart, which is essentially the Bitcoin halving chart, but you can see where the peaks of the bull market cycle are, and they're found on this chart in red. Typically, when we get to around 37% of the Bitcoin halving, that's when we start to get that top signal as per the last few cycles. You can see that these red dots over here signaled that we were getting a little bit of a top, but within a few weeks, the top was clearly there in the past few cycles. And this cycle, you can see that we're now at this point, this pivotal point in the market. And so I don't actually think that there's that much longer before we start to go into a bear market, despite the fact that everyone is already talking about Bitcoin going to 250K and beyond this bull market cycle. This is the super cycle. We are going much, much higher. Now, to mitigate this, obviously I will always hold some Bitcoin, but as we start to break all-time high more convincingly, I will be offloading my Bitcoin onto the market in preparation to accumulate lower into the bear market. And I also wanted to show you this chart, which is the Bitcoin market cycle bottom ROI. You can see that every line represents each cycle. This blue line, we have the first cycle, then we have the second cycle, then we have the third cycle, which is essentially this yellow line, and the green one, and our current cycle is this pink line. What do you notice based on these past 3 cycles? It is the beginning of the end. We are getting quite extended into the bull market cycle. This is why I want you to be prepared, because it will get euphoric and you may lose sight of the bigger picture here. We are quite extended, and yes, this can continue. Bitcoin can potentially go up to, for example, $150,000, but we are at the latter stages of this bull market cycle. Do not kid yourself. And as we get closer to the end of the cycle, we also have big headlines like this. $1.3 trillion Morgan Stanley says Bitcoin is a scarce asset akin to digital gold. The firm will allow financial advisors to flexibly allocate cryptocurrency to their portfolios. Stay tuned for more and more headlines like this continuing to come out as we approach the top of this cycle, which, to be perfectly clear, I don't think is in. And just quickly, as we head into this new week, this is what Michael Saylor had to say. No new orange dots this week, telling us that he didn't actually go ahead and buy some Bitcoin, but he's sitting at some pretty nice profits, right around $31 billion in profit. This guy just keeps on accumulating, and it wouldn't surprise me that if we do go ahead and get a correction, he would likely be adding more Bitcoin to his portfolio. So the big picture is pretty clear. We had this weekly close above this resistance of 119.5K. This is ultimately the level that I would be looking at for a potential retest. But sometimes Bitcoin doesn't go ahead and give us those levels. And so you need to be prepared for both scenarios, whether or not we retest this level and altcoins will likely bleed, or we just continue to rip higher from here. But my base case here is that at some point we will go ahead and move lower to execute a nice long in this market, and then we can go ahead and target a strong break of the all-time highs, not just a wick which we saw yesterday. However, we may also tap some liquidity to the upside before we go ahead and accept back in the range only to move afterwards. So make sure you're managing your positions carefully, because this will be a tricky little period in the market to navigate, especially if you are a trader. I also wanted to show you the liquidity here. On the 12-hour time frame, you can see that people are indeed piling into shorts, myself included. But on the 3-day time frame onwards, you can see that it paints a little bit of a clearer picture with more liquidity to the downside. And if we take a look at my favorite Bitcoin liquidation map, you can see that on the 1-day time frame, it is relatively even. On the 7-day time frame, there are a lot more longs in this market, and on the 30-day time frame, exactly the same. There is around 18 billion worth of cumulative long liquidation leverage to be grabbed to the downside, and to the upside, we have just around 3.5 billion worth of shorts. And so what could happen, which would definitely shake out most of the market, would be a move up to grab this upside liquidity around the wick, and then we go ahead and move lower. Then everyone thinks that we will go back down to the bottom of this range, so everyone piles into shorts, but we end up holding support, and then we go ahead and move higher. All I really want to say here is that you do not want to miss the forest for the trees. This is a bullish weekly breakout, and I don't think that the top is in for this cycle. And that sums up today's quick video. There's a non-negligible chance that in the short term here, we can move lower before we move higher. But since that weekly breakout of 119.5K, a strong candle above that level, to me, it means that the market will be moving much, much higher. Now let's see whether or not the market makers will be shaking us out, grabbing some of that upside liquidity, then grabbing the downside liquidity, then going ahead and making a proper breakout to brand new all-time highs and holding above there. Let's see how it plays out. If you enjoy the content, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in tomorrow's video.